I'm Dianna Dilworth, Executive Editor here at Brand Innovators. I am so pleased to be sitting here with Jill Kramer, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Mastercard.
I got both.
Okay, yeah. So that's a lot. Yeah. That's a big role to fill. So you've taken on this role at Mastercard at a time that commerce is no longer confined to checkout. It's sort of embedded everywhere. So what does that mean?
So, you know, it's absolutely fascinating. I was just sitting down with a CMO acquaintance of mine from storied brands. Like, she has the privilege of leading these storied brands. And after we were on a panel together, we just sat down to talk about the things that she's facing right now. And for brands to continue to evolve and address new audiences, new growth opportunities, they have to change and they have to meet people in very different ways and in very different places. And you could be really creative about that. Like, she was telling me some of her ideas and they were brilliant, but she also has the business asking her, she kept saying they want the math. They want the math. So how do you make those two things meet? And we just sat and had a conversation around commerce media, around understanding data and analytics and insights. And we just like came up with 10 ideas. So I think the biggest thing is to recognize that it is changing, to recognize that you need both the big ideas, but also the business case. And how do you bring all of that together? And the other thing is she needs it to be incredibly fast. So you have to do all that and you need to do it at speed.
So what does this mean for modern CMOs?
I think it means that you can't assume that your playbook from even last year is going to work again this year. And I was just talking to one of our team members about, you also have to be really open to ideas. Sometimes you set the criteria at the beginning of a project and you don't realize you're restricting the creativity and the ideation simply by saying, how can you do this for me? Because you're assuming that the conditions are going to exist, that thing that is always applied. And it does take a bit of courage to say, I actually have no idea what I want. Talk to me. Like, work with your partners. Ask them to show you what they could do. Ask your teams. I had coffee for 15 minutes with a group today from Singapore, Germany, and Poland. They pitched me one of the best ideas I had heard in my 7 months since I've been here. And I need to create a system, every marketer does, where those ideas have a path to bubble right up and they could be seen and embraced and developed.
Is this something you can share, or is it still TBD?
Too early, but it will be in the world before the end of this calendar year. Okay. It's really smart.
We're checking back with you on that. So just tell me what the next era of commerce looks like and what that means for brands and what that means for consumers.
Yeah, it looks very, very personal. Commerce Media hosted a breakfast the other day. The marketing leaders who were there were so smart and so chatty, and we were talking about so many things. And one person was talking about, like, media has to be personal. And we can talk about AI until we're blue in the face. You could love it, you can hate it. But the reality is we have the ability to be that personal now. For years, we've been like, okay, do we treat everybody like one big lump? Or we can break down to 5 lumps, 10 lumps, 20 lumps. Now we can get to the personal level. You just need to create ideas that could live at the highest level. They have undeniable DNA in them to the brand, and then they can be absorbed and delivered in ways that are highly personal.
So can you give me an example of what that might look like in action with some of your communications?
Yeah, so if you think about a concept like small businesses, right? So you need to have a big platform idea about, I'll use our brand as an example. What does Mastercard actually do for small businesses? Most people don't know. So how are we going to tell that basic foundational concept in a consistent way? But the way you're going to talk about that in Singapore is very different than the way you're going to talk about it in Dubai, and very different than the way you're going to talk about it in Brazil. Those are all completely different environments. So how do you have the platform idea and then bring it down to a very specific level to the moment where the actual business can understand what's happening to them and how they prepare for what's next. But what's happening to them is not the same. What they need to know is that they can always count on us to help them forecast that, figure out how they deal with that, what's the technology, what's the innovation, where's the security, all of those things that are going to change around them that we can do. So it's a bigger platform idea, but it goes to the actual owner of the actual small business in that community. And the way we live as a brand, we go to market through customers, through partners. It's a very organic, very community-centric approach. Those things take more work, but they feel a lot more authentic when you receive them. And that's what brands have to figure out how to do, because it does take more work. But it should be worth it on the other side if you're really tapping into something that's incredible, that is an actual human insight that varies by individual.
It's a very good point about marketing across locations and globally. Can you talk about how the media landscape is being more fragmented and kind of what that means to when you connect to the consumer and how you can actually break through when they're being bombarded with messages?
I think this is the hardest part, and this was a moment that we were just talking about with the group I mentioned earlier. There's no easy path right now for CMOs around this, because it would be lovely if we could be, oh, this is out now. We don't spend on that anymore. And sometimes people like to make those big statements, but it's not that simple. And yet you have to find the time and the space and the energy and the money to invest in the things that are going to potentially give you new insights and new outcomes. So figuring out how to move the money around, unless you're one of the very lucky people who get more money every year. If you are, I want to know who you are. But you have to figure out how to move things around, how to think more modularly. Maybe you test something in a line of business or a region, have the reason to believe that that can land and expand somewhere else. But media landscape it takes test and learn, and it takes new sources of data to connect you to new insights. That's a conversation we were just having, and there is a huge appetite for new data that will fill in missing gaps, that I can make a case to test that, let it prove itself out, and then go further. Then you can say, I'm going to pull back in other areas, but you have to be flying the plane and building it, as they say.
Mm-hmm. You talked about how AI can help with personalization and really get to the customer on a very targeted level. Can you talk about consumers don't tend to see brands by channel or by, they're not thinking about the media mix model.
They don't.
So how do you ensure that the consumer experience just feels right for them?
Yeah, this is where a little bit we have to get out of our own way. It's funny, I never heard anyone say that, like the consumer doesn't care about the media mix model, but that's incredibly true. And very often organizations, especially larger ones, you can get in the trap of where are you coming from within the enterprise? Where's your money funded? Which line of business are you trying to support? And you're not actually getting to what's the outside world. But think about brands and campaigns you've seen over the years where as a marketing expert or an advertising expert, you absolutely know they're supporting different business lines, different growth centers. But to the world, it's just a campaign. They've created a theme, a platform, a set of characters, and they're just going on and on and on. We have to get to a point where we get out of our own way and connect things from the viewpoint of the person who's seeing it, not the point of origin in the enterprise.
I love that. We're here at Cannes, which is the Festival of Creativity. How are you thinking about creativity as these systems that shape marketing are changing so drastically?
Yeah, the first thing that I think about is, are we giving marketing teams, creative teams, the context that they need? So if we're talking about the fact that the idea that I heard this morning over coffee was a really smart idea for Central Europe. And I was like, wouldn't that apply to Southeast Asia and maybe even apply to Latin America? And they were like, I didn't think about that. So the first thing is, are we giving the people who are coming up with our ideas all of the context to see, I've got my head down and I'm coming up with something, thinking of my business problem, but can I also lift my head back up and realize my idea is even bigger and better than I thought. The second thing is you have to remove the barriers. If bringing an idea up means that that idea is going to get caught up in bureaucracy and governance and the creativity in life will be drained out of it, you won't create that situation. And then the last one is to celebrate it, to see it and to celebrate it. And we do that here once a year for the lucky few, depending if lucky applies in this heat, that get to come here, but we don't actually reflect on the work that much. And here I am, I'm new to Mastercard. We're about to go into our next planning session. I had all these ideas and somebody brought up a really good point. Should we look back at our favorite work from the past 12 months, 24 months, and just like reflect in that for a minute? And I'm like, yes. So even when you want to create the context and the environment for, confidence and certainty, and we won't put up barriers, sometimes it's just taking a moment to say, let's actually just talk about the work. And then let's go back and immerse ourselves in the business goals. So I think there's many things that we can do to make sure that our teams are able to be as creative as they absolutely can be.
I love that, celebrating the creative wins and grounding yourself in who you are and what you have been communicating as you look forward. You mentioned the various countries globally. I'm curious, as such a massive global brand, how you operate globally and still show up locally.
Yeah.
And then is it like, do the teams create work up from the local markets? And then how do you ensure, though, that there's some kind of global consistency? What is your process there?
Yeah, so this is a challenge. I was talking to another chief brand officer 2 days ago who is going through the exact same challenge. I think a lot of global brands face this. You don't want to dampen the creativity and the local community and cultural context, but you don't want that all not to add up to a brand that is getting stronger every single year. And that's a really delicate balance to try to hit. The conditions we just talked about are critical to making sure you don't. But I think it does start with, does the brand know itself deeply? Do you know exactly where you're going? And does everyone know that? So when they're coming up with those local ideas, they know it's furthering not only the business case locally, but the motion of the entire ship globally. And it just takes talking about that and making sure that they have the information that they need to know that I'm solving a local problem, but I'm also furthering the global mission.
And obviously, I imagine at a global and iconic brand like Mastercard, who has such a strong, the priceless platform and grounded in the consumer culture, can you talk about what culture means to you as a brand? I know you show up at various cultural events and you're really giving something special to your customers.
Yeah, the first thing about culture that matters so much is the culture at Mastercard. I'm very, very lucky because this company loves its brand. They protect it, they advocate for it. Not every CMO has that situation, so that's incredibly lucky. When you get to the culture of every market, we actually run our business that way. So the brand has the privilege of being with the business. So if you think about the way we go to market with partners, brands, financial institutions, fintechs, they're all in and of their community. I recently learned that in the US, for example, there are all of these small community banks and credit unions. They're all about their industry, their local town, their local community. So when you're coming up with ideas, you can have a massive partnership like McLaren, but we also have very local partnerships, sponsorships, brand advocates who are from the community. So you have to be looking up and down. That's, again, back to context. So if you're a marketer and you're working with the business and you know those customers and you know the communities they serve, you also need to know every brand asset I could bring to bear to meet that community's needs. So it requires both the business and the brand to know that community inside and out, live in there, work in there, be a part of it, and then bring ideas forward that you actually know apply.
I love that. Just the context ranging from a McLaren sponsorship to a local
symphony or music house. You know, it's that dramatic. A local sports team. It's what is that group passionate about? What builds their community, and how do they come together? And the beautiful thing is you have that really locally, but you also have your local pockets of people who participate in big global ideas. So I was with Lou McEwen from McLaren Racing last night, and we were talking about the fact that there are cities who are passionately in love with F1 racing and McLaren racing, and they don't have a race, but they still participate. So one of the things we're talking about is how do you bring those experiences to them as well? So you're not constrained by the resources you have in that community. You have to know what they love, what's priceless to them, and make sure you're allowing them to have that participation and access.
I love that. So tell me, as you look ahead at the future of commerce, where is it increasingly intelligent, embedded, in real time? What will distinguish the winners in this context?
I do think, I know there's a love-hate relationship with data, but it does come down to data. You need to know who you're going after. I think a lot of times we think about, are we where our customers are? And that's one thing, but maybe more importantly, are we where the people who aren't yet our customers are? And how do we get to them? So you can't begin to assess the plethora of options you have if you don't know really well who you're trying to reach and have reason to believe that they will come to you if you put yourself in their path in a way that is aligned with what they're actually looking to accomplish and look to do. So it starts with a really clear articulation of who am I going after? Why do I believe I have something that can address their unmet needs? And then how do I appear where they are? And we're combining it with their intent in the moment in a way that just makes things helpful.
I heard you say the word path, and it makes me think of that path to purchase. Obviously, data is very key when studying your consumer base. What role does data play as you help shape this creativity? What I want to add to it is at the scope where you're doing big brand partnerships, global campaigns, very localized things. How do you balance the data across that?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, this is a benefit of AI. The amount of data you can get through and assess and ingest and then come up with hypotheses around is significantly more today. So you might have made mistakes because you got a couple of layers in and you generalized, and you can actually go further. If you think about Gen Z, biggest transfer of wealth in history, they're going to want different things, expect different things from brands. And if you try to, you can't even lump them into one category. I mean, we know that. It's explicit. You have never been able to lump any generation into a single category, but the bigger that those pools get and the more diverse that the conditions in which they hope to thrive get, the more challenging that is. So I think the way the data needs to feed the idea is in a way that allows the insights to be as personal as possible. And you don't stop only a few levels in. Like I always like to say, you got to go really deep so you can come back up and see, here's something that is a kernel of truth that applies to all, but the way I'm going to bring it to them and the way they can internalize and articulate it would be very different.
So it's really focusing on that human insight. We have 1 minute left, so I'd love for you to share your thoughts about what you're learning here at Cannes and what advice you have for the other CMOs who are here in the audience to take with them today.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all the things we're hearing from different people, they stick in your head. I write them all down, but also listening to your own teams. If you have the privilege of being here with your teams, are you going to things together, talking about what somebody said? Are you walking the work? I keep hearing as I walk down, people saying, go to the basement, go to the basement. And it's not just because it's cool in there. To not walk the work is like criminal, but to walk it, somebody was saying earlier, put on your headphones and go walk the work. I actually want to walk it with my friends and my team. I want to talk about it. I want to be able to say that was a brilliant idea. And sometimes those are so subtle and sometimes they're incredibly bold, but just to talk about it. So I think listen, learn, and then share would be the best things to have happen here. And sometimes we get so busy and we get the lifeblood drained out of us by just existing through your schedule. So I hope everyone gets a chance to have a little time for that.
Yes, take the time, go down to the Palais. Thank you so much for being here with us, Joe.
Thank you for having me.